The late November wind whipped through Manhattan, sharp and relentless, tugging at coats and scarves as it sliced down Fifth Avenue. Melania Trump stood near the edge of a charity gala setup, her tall frame wrapped in a cream wool coat, her dark hair pinned neatly beneath a wide-brimmed hat. Around her, the event buzzed, volunteers unpacking boxes, donors sipping coffee, holiday music crackling from a small stage. She was there to cut the ribbon, to offer a polished smile for the cameras, to play the roles she'd mastered long ago. But her eyes drifted beyond the crowd, tracing the gray skyline of a city she'd conquered before it could conquer her. Blocks away, under the shadow of a rusted overpass, Sophia Crow crouched beside a cardboard shelter, her thin fingers counting the coins in her palm, 37 cents, scratched and dull from the pavement. Her breath clouded in the frigid air, her patched jacket too small to block the chill. She was 12, but her eyes carried more, years of weight, of her mother's coughs echoing behind her. The shelter, a tarp strung between two pillars, was all they had since the downtown mission turned them away. Sophia tucked the coins into her pocket, her stomach twisting. 37 cents wouldn't buy Mama's pills, wouldn't buy anything. Melania adjusted her gloves, her movements precise, deliberate. The gala was for a children's fund, coats, toys, meals for the holidays. She'd picked it herself, a quiet nod to Barron's early years, to winters spent shielding him from a world too loud, too harsh. A volunteer approached, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Trump, we're ready when you are," she said, her voice bright, eager. Melania nodded, her lips curving into that faint, practiced smile. "Soon," she murmured, her accent soft but distinct. She stepped toward the ribbon, her heels clicking on the pavement, when someone, slammed into her. Sophia hadn't meant to hit anyone. She'd slipped into the gala's fringe, lured by the scent of hot cider and the stacks of sandwiches on a folding table. Her plan was simple: wait, watch, grab something when no one noticed. Kids were invisible at these things. She'd learned that scavenging scraps from street fairs and markets. But the crowd shifted, a man jostled her, and she stumbled forward, her shoulder crashing into a tall woman in white. Coins flew from her pocket, clattering to the ground, a pitiful scatter of copper and nickel. "Sorry!" Sophia gasped, dropping to her knees, her hands scrambling to gather them. Melania steadied herself, her breath catching, not from the collision, but from the girl. Thin, shivering, her dark hair tangled under a frayed hood. She couldn't have been older than Barron when they'd first come here, small, fragile, but fierce in her panic. The coins glinted in the weak sunlight, 37 cents, rolling toward Melania's feet. She knelt, her coat brushing the pavement, and picked up a dime, holding it out. "You dropped this," she said, her voice low, steady, cutting through the gala's hum. Sophia froze, her hand hovering over a penny. The woman's voice. It wasn't sharp, wasn't angry, but it held something familiar, a lilt she hadn't heard since Mama's stories of home. She looked up, meeting Melania's eyes, cool, green, unreadable. "I didn't mean to," Sophia started, her own accent slipping out, rougher, rawer, but unmistakably Slovenian. Melania's brow twitched, a flicker of recognition, but she stayed silent, pressing the dime into Sophia's palm. "It's okay," she said, softer now, almost a whisper. The volunteer hurried over, flustered. "Mrs. Trump, are you all right?" "I'll take care of this." She reached for Sophia, but Melania raised a hand, stopping her. "No," she said, her tone firm, final. "She's fine." The volunteer faltered, then retreated, clutching her clipboard. Sophia stared, her heart pounding. This woman, whoever she was, didn't shout, didn't call security. She just watched, her gaze piercing but not harsh. Sophia gripped the dime, her other hand scooping the last coin, 37 cents again, whole but worthless. Melania rose, brushing her coat, her mind racing. That accent, Slovenian, a voice from a place she'd left behind. She saw herself in the girl's hunched shoulders, the way she guarded those coins like treasure. New York, 1990s. Her own early days surged back, cold auditions, empty pockets, a dream stitched with grit. Are you hungry? Melania asked, the words escaping before she could stop them. Sophia's eyes widened, then narrowed, wary. I'm fine, she lied, her voice tight. A man in a suit approached, James, her security detail, his voice low. Ma'am, the ribbon. Melania waved him off, her focus locked on the girl. One moment, she said, then turned back to Sophia. There's food over there. She nodded toward the table. More than they need. Sophia followed her gaze, the sandwiches piled high, her mouth watering despite herself. Why? She asked, suspicion lacing her tone. Melania paused, her lips parting, then closing. Because I see you, she said finally, her voice barely audible over the wind. Sophia didn't move, her fingers curling around the coins. She didn't trust adults, not anymore, but this woman's words stuck, heavy, strange. She glanced at the food, then back at Melania, her resolve wavering. Mama needs it more, she muttered, almost to herself. Melania's chest tightened, a memory stirring, barren, small and sick, her whispering promises she couldn't keep. Where is she? She asked, her tone gentle but insistent. Sophia's eyes darted away, her silence a wall. Melania straightened, her face calm but her mind unsettled. Take what you need, she said, stepping back, giving the girl space. Sophia hesitated, then darted to the table, snatching a sandwich and a water bottle, her movements quick, practiced. She didn't look back as she slipped into the crowd, vanishing like a shadow. Melania watched her go, her hands clenching inside her gloves. Inside, a voice whispered, a voice from Sevnica, from long ago. You were her once. The gala rolled on, cameras flashed, the ribbon fell, applause swelled. But Melania's thoughts stayed with the girl, with that accent, with those coins. She didn't know her name, didn't know her story, not yet, but something had begun, quiet, unseen, like a seed in frozen ground. Dusk settled over Manhattan, the city's golden glow fading into a bruised purple sky, streetlights flickering on along the cracked edges of the west side. Sophia Krause slipped beneath the overpass, her sneakers silent on the damp concrete, the sandwich and water bottle pressed tight against her chest. The wind howled through the steel beams overhead, carrying the distant rumble of traffic, but it couldn't drown out the coughs rasping from the dark shelter ahead. Sophia's steps quickened, her breath shallow, the 37 cents jingling faintly in her pocket. She'd found something real, but it still didn't feel like enough. High above, in the stillness of Trump Tower, Melania Trump stood by her penthouse window, the gala's chatter long faded, replaced by the quiet of the high-rise. Her coat hung on a rack, her gloves folded neatly beside a crystal vase, but her hands stayed restless, tracing the edge of the sill. The girl's face lingered in her mind, those wary eyes, that accent, the way she'd said, Mama needs it more. Melania's gaze drifted to a framed photo on the shelf, Baron at 10, bundled in a scarf, her arm around him in Central Park. She'd fought for him then, silently, fiercely, and now, something stirred again, a pull she couldn't name. Sophia ducked under the tarp, the dim light of a cracked lantern casting shadows across their makeshift home. Cardboard lined the ground, a thin blanket draped over a pile of bags, all they owned, scavenged or stolen. Elena Crowley curled on a sleeping bag, her dark hair matted with sweat, her breaths ragged between coughs. She was 38, but the cancer had etched years into her face, hollowing her cheeks, dulling her eyes. Sophia? She croaked, her voice a whisper against the wind. Sophia knelt beside her, setting the sandwich down. I got food, Mama, she said, her tone bright, forced. Elena's hand trembled as she reached out, brushing Sophia's cheek. My brave girl, she murmured, her Slovenian accent thick, warm despite the pain. She tried to sit up, wincing as her joints resisted, the illness gnawing at her bones. Sophia propped a bag behind her back, steadying her. Where? Elena asked, her eyes narrowing, suspicious. Sophia hesitated, then shrugged. A place downtown. They had extra. She didn't mention the woman in white, the coins, the strange kindness. She didn't know how to explain it, didn't trust it yet. Melania turned from the window, crossing to her desk, her movements slow, deliberate. The gala program lay open, smiling faces, donation totals, her name in bold, but her thoughts were elsewhere. That girl, Slovenen, she was certain. The way she clutched those coins, the fear in her voice, it was too familiar, too close. She remembered Sevnica, her mother's sewing machine humming late into the night, her own dreams of something bigger. "I see you," she'd said, and now she couldn't unsee her. She picked up her phone, hesitated, then dialed James. "I need you to find someone," she said when he answered, her voice low, steady. Under the overpass, Sophia unwrapped the sandwich. Turkey, lettuce, a little mayo, still soft despite the cold. She broke it in half, handing the larger piece to Elena. "Eat, mama," she urged, her own stomach growling. Elena shook her head, pushing it back. "You first, to say Smoj," she said, her pet name for Sophia, my heart, slipping out like a reflex. Sophia frowned, stubborn. "You didn't eat yesterday." "Please." Elena sighed, a tear escaping as she took a small bite, her hands shaking so badly Sophia had to steady them. The water bottle came next, Sophia tilting it to her mother's lips, watching her swallow with effort. Melania waited as James's voice crackled through the phone. "A girl? At the gala?" he asked, cautious but unsurprised. She'd made other requests. "Yes," Melania said, her tone clipped. "Young, maybe 12. Dark hair, thin. She spoke like me." She didn't say Slovenian, didn't need to. James knew her roots, knew her silences. She took food and ran. "Find where she went." A pause then. "Yes, ma'am. I'll check the area, ask around. Might take time." Melania nodded to herself. "Take the time," she said, then hung up, her eyes drifting back to Baron's photo. Inside, a voice whispered, "She's someone's Baron." Sophia sat back, nibbling her half of the sandwich, the bread sticking in her dry throat. Elena coughed again, a deep, wet sound that made Sophia's chest tighten. The pills, chemo scraps from a free clinic, were gone, the last one taken 3 days ago. 37 cents wouldn't buy more, wouldn't buy anything but a candy bar, maybe. She thought of the woman, tall, quiet, her coat brighter than anything Sophia owned. "Because I see you," she'd said, and Sophia didn't know why it stuck, why it felt like a thread pulling her back. "Mama," she said softly, "do you think someone could help us?" Elena's eyes fluttered open, weary but sharp. "Help?" she rasped, a bitter edge to her voice. "We came here for help, America, the dream. Look at us now." She gestured weakly at the tarp, the cardboard, the cold seeping in. Sophia swallowed, her hands slipping into her pocket, brushing the coins. "Not everyone," she murmured, picturing the woman's green eyes, the way she'd knelt on the dirty ground. Elena didn't hear, her head lolling back, exhaustion overtaking her. Sophia pulled the blanket higher, her jaw tight. She didn't believe in dreams anymore, not really, but something flickered, small and stubborn. Melania sank into a chair, the penthouse silent around her. She closed her eyes, and Sevnica came back, her mother's voice. "Work hard, Melania, and the world will see you." She'd worked, she'd risen, but this girl, she was still down there, unseen, unheard. Melania's fingers tightened on the chair's arm. She didn't know her name, didn't know her mother, but she knew the weight of those coins, the hunger in that voice. "Find her," she told James, and now it was a promise, to the girl, to herself, to the past she'd carried all these years. Under the overpass, Sophia crowed beside Elena, the lantern's light fading as the battery died. The sandwich was gone, the water half drunk, but the cold stayed, relentless. She listened to her mother's uneven breaths, her hand resting on the 37 cents, her mind on the woman in white. She didn't know who she was, didn't know she just met Melania Trump, but she felt her, a shadow in the dark, a thread she couldn't yet pull. And somewhere above, Melania felt her too, a spark in the silence, waiting to grow. The Manhattan morning dawned gray and heavy, a thick fog rolling off the Hudson, wrapping the city in a damp veil. Melania Trump sat at her penthouse desk, a cup of black tea steaming untouched beside her. The gala was yesterday's memory, headlines lauding her poise, her quiet elegance. But her mind was tangled in the image of a girl with 37 cents and a voice from her past. Her phone buzzed, James's name lighting the screen. She answered without speaking, her breath held. "Found something," he said, his voice crisp, efficient. "West Side, under the overpass near 10th. A tarp setup, girl and a woman, sick-looking. Matches your description." Blocks away, Sophia Crowell knelt beside her mother. The tarp sheltered them and cold, the lantern dead since last night. Elena's coughs had deepened, each one a wet, wrenching sound that bounced off the concrete pillars. Her face was pale, nearly gray, her lips cracked and dry. Sophia pressed a damp rag, swiped from a diner bathroom, to her forehead, her hands steady despite the panic clawing her chest. "Mama, hold on," she whispered, her voice trembling. The water bottle was empty, the sandwich a distant comfort. 37 cents sat useless in her pocket, mocking her efforts. Melania set the phone down, her fingers tightening around the teacup, its warmth lost on her. "Under the overpass." She repeated to herself, the words sinking in, vivid and real. She pictured it, tarps, shadows, a place she'd never lived but could feel, too close to the edges of her own story. Sevmika hadn't been this harsh, but it had been tough. Her mother's late nights, her father's silences, her own hunger for more. She stood crossing to the window, the fog blurring Trump Tower's view. "A sick woman," James had said. "A mother." Her chest tightened. Baron's small hand in hers years ago flashed through her mind. Sophia rummaged through their bags, her fingers brushing torn clothes, a broken comb, nothing useful. The pills, chemo leftovers from a free clinic, were gone, the last one swallowed 3 days ago. She'd begged once, outside a pharmacy, but the man had snapped. "Get a job!" As if she could, as if Mama could. Elena stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Sophia," she rasped, her hand reaching blindly. Sophia grabbed it, fierce. "I'm not leaving you." A cough cut Elena off, her body shaking. Sophia's eyes burned, tears she refused to shed. "Mama, please," she whispered, shaking her gently. Melania pulled on her coat, her movements swift now, decisive. "West Side, 10th. She told James through the phone, already heading for the elevator. "Meet me there." His voice crackled back, hesitant. "Ma'am, it's not safe. Let me handle." "No," she cut in, her tone steel. "I need to see." She didn't explain, didn't have to. James knew her resolve, had seen it in quieter battles. The elevator doors closed, her reflection staring back, calm, composed, but inside, a storm brewed. "I see you," she told the girl, and now she couldn't turn away. Under the overpass, Sophia's hope frayed thin. Elena's breathing slowed, too shallow, too weak. She'd stopped coughing, but that wasn't good, it was worse. Sophia's chest tightened, her mind racing. The woman in white, those words, that look, flashed back. She didn't know her, didn't trust her, but she'd had food, had seen her. Sophia clenched her fists, the 37 cents digging into her palm. She had to try something, anything. She heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and her head snapped up, fear spiking. Strangers meant trouble, cops, thieves, worse. Melania stepped out of the black SUV, James and another agent, Mike, at her sides. The overpass loomed ahead, its steel frame shrouded in fog, the air thick with exhaust and damp. She pulled her scarf tighter, her heels muted on the uneven ground. "This way," James said, guiding her past rusted beams and scattered trash. Her pulse quickened, not fear, not quite, but something deeper, a pull she couldn't shake. She'd come to New York with nothing once, built a life from scraps. This girl, this mother, they were still scraping. Sophia scrambled to her feet, shielding Elena, her heart hammering. She grabbed a broken bottle from the ground, its jagged edge trembling in her hand. "Stay back," she shouted, her voice cracking but fierce. The fog parted, and 3 figures emerged. 2 men in dark suits, and her, the woman in white, her coat now gray in the dim light. Sophia's breath caught, the bottle wavering. "You," she rasped, recognition hitting hard. Melania stopped, her hands rising slightly, palms out. "It's me," she said, her voice calm, cutting through the wind. Melania saw the bottle, the fear, the girl's small frame guarding the tarp like a warrior. Behind her, a shape, thin, still, wrapped in a blanket. The mother. Her throat tightened, her eyes locking on Sophia's. "I came to help," she said softer now, her accent slipping free, a bridge between them. Sophia didn't lower the bottle, but her grip faltered, confusion battling desperation. "Why?" she demanded, her voice raw. James stepped forward, his hand on his radio, but Melania waved him back. "Because I heard you," she said, echoing words she'd once told herself, words her mother had whispered in Sevnica's cold nights. Sophia stared, her chest heaving, then stepped aside, her hands shaking, the bottle dropping with a dull clink. Melania moved past her, kneeling by Elena, her hand hovering over the woman's pale face. A mother, dying maybe, but not gone. Not yet. Her coat brushed the wet concrete, her mind resolute. Inside, a voice roared. "I won't let her be unseen." She turned to James, her tone urgent but controlled. "Call help now." Sophia watched, frozen, as the woman she didn't know took charge, a shadow turning into something real. The fog clung to the overpass like a heavy curtain, muffling the distant pulse of Manhattan as Melania Trump knelt beside Elena Krell, her cream coat now streaked with damp concrete. Elena's breaths came shallow and uneven, her skin clammy under the faint streetlight seeping through the tarp. Melania's hand hovered over her forehead, steady despite the storm inside her. She'd seen illness before, her mother's weary eyes, Baron's fevers, but this was raw, teetering on a knife's edge. She turned to James, her voice low, urgent. "Call an ambulance. Now." Sophia Krell stood a step back, her arms crossed tight, the broken bottle abandoned at her feet. Her eyes darted between Melania and her mother, wide with fear, sharp with doubt. "Who are you?" she demanded again, her voice cracking, her Slovenian accent cutting through the cold air. Melania didn't answer, not yet. She pulled off her scarf, folding it under Elena's head, a small cushion against the hard ground. "She needs a doctor," she said, her tone firm but gentle, meeting Sophia's gaze. "Let me help her." James spoke into his radio, his words sharp. "Medical emergency, west side, 10th, under the overpass," while Mike scanned the shadows, keeping watch. Sophia's fist clenched, her breath fogging fast. "They'll take her away," she whispered, panic rising. "Hospitals, they ask questions, they call people." She'd seen it before, shelters, social workers, threats of losing Mama. Melania's hand paused, her eyes softening. "Not this time," she said, a promise she intended to keep. "I'll make sure." Elena stirred, a weak cough rattling her chest, her hand groping blindly. Sophia dropped to her knees, seizing it. "Mama, I'm here," she said, her voice breaking. Elena's eyes fluttered, unfocused. "Sophia, don't," she rasped, then faded, her head sinking back. Sophia's sob broke free, sharp and small, her shoulders trembling. Melania watched, her throat tight. She'd whispered to Baron once, "You're safe," during a storm. Now she wanted to say it to this girl, this mother, but words wouldn't cut it. Action would. The wail of a siren pierced the fog, growing louder, closer. Melania stood, brushing her hands, her mind racing. She turned to James as he pocketed the radio. "When they get here," she said, her voice low, "tell them she's with me. No questions, no forms, not yet." James nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "Yes, ma'am." Melania knelt again, her hand resting lightly on Sophia's shoulder. "They'll take her to a hospital. She'll get medicine. You'll stay with her." Sophia looked up, tears streaking her dirt-smudged face. "Why do you care?" she asked, raw, desperate. Melania hesitated, the question sinking deep. Inside, Sevnica whispered, her mother's hands sewing late, her own steps into a new world, alone but determined. Because I was you, she said finally, her accent thick, unguarded. Not here, not like this, but lost once. Someone saw me. Sophia blinked, confusion mingling with something else. Hope, maybe, fragile and untested. The ambulance screeched to a halt beyond the overpass, red lights flashing through the mist. Paramedics spilled out, boots pounding, a stretcher rattling behind them. Over here, James called, waving them in. Sophia flinched as they approached, her grip on Elena tightening, but Melania stayed close, her presence steady. A paramedic, a woman with short hair and sharp eyes, knelt by Elena, checking her pulse, her breathing. She's critical, she said, glancing at her partner. Pulse weak, respiratory distress, possible pneumonia or worse. She looked at Sophia, then Melania. Family? Melania nodded, quick, decisive. Yes. I'm with them. The paramedic paused, then shrugged, too pressed to argue. We're taking her to Mount Sinai West. You can follow. Sophia watched, frozen, as they lifted Elena onto the stretcher, her mother's thin frame vanishing under straps and a blanket. Mama, she started, lunging forward, but Melania caught her arm, gentle but firm. Go with her, she said. I'll meet you there. Sophia pulled back, her eyes wild. I don't even know you, she cried, but her feet moved anyway, drawn to the ambulance. Melania let her go, her hand falling to her side. You will, she murmured, too quiet for Sophia to hear. The paramedics loaded Elena, Sophia climbing in after, her small figure swallowed by the ambulance's bright interior. The doors slammed shut, the siren blared, and they were gone, taillights fading into the fog. Melania stood still, the wind tugging at her hair, her coat. James stepped beside her, his voice low. Mount Sinai West. I'll get the car. She nodded, her eyes fixed on the empty space where the ambulance had been. Inside, a voice roared. Not unseen, not anymore. Sophia sat beside the stretcher, her hand clutching Elena's, the paramedic working fast, oxygen mask, for line, a blur of motion. The siren screamed overhead, but Sophia barely heard it, her world narrowing to her mother's shallow breaths. She thought of the woman, tall, quiet, her coat dirty now, who'd knelt in their mess, who'd called help without hesitation. Because I was you, she'd said, and Sophia didn't understand, not fully, but she felt it, a thread, thin but real, tying her to this stranger. Melania climbed into the SUV, James at the wheel, Mike silent in the back. The city blurred past, lights, horns, fog, but her mind stayed under the overpass, with the girl's tear-streaked face, the mother's fading pulse. She didn't know their names, not yet, but she knew their weight, their need. Her phone stayed dark. She didn't call anyone, didn't need to. This was hers to fix, quiet, unseen, like the promises she'd kept for Baron. The hospital loomed ahead, and Melania steeled herself. The chain had begun, she wouldn't let it break. The fluorescent lights of Mount Sinai West hummed overhead, bathing the emergency room in a stark, sterile glow amid the clamor of beeping machines and hurried footsteps. Melania Trump stepped through the sliding doors, her coat still damp from the overpass, her scarf left behind with the struggling mother. James followed, his suit pristine despite the night, while Mike stayed with the SUV. Sophia Krause sat in a corner of the trauma bay, her knees drawn up, her patched jacket dwarfed by the hospital chair. Beyond the curtain, Elena lay hooked to machines, an oxygen mask fogging with each faint breath, and fluor dripping into her arm. The paramedics had rushed her in, doctors swarming, their words a jumble to Sophia. Severe malnutrition, possible sepsis, cancer progression. She gripped her mother's hand through the railing, her 37 cents forgotten in her pocket. The woman in white, her voice, her promise, lingered in her mind, a lifeline she didn't dare fully grasp. Melania approached the desk, her presence quiet but commanding. A woman and a girl, she said to the nurse, her accent soft but firm. brought in from the west side, under the overpass. Where are they? The nurse, a weary woman with graying hair, looked up, then down at her screen, unfazed by the familiar face. Trauma Bay, bed 3, she said, nodding toward a hallway. Family only. Melania didn't hesitate. I'm with them, she repeated, her tone brooking no argument. The nurse shrugged, waving her through. Sophia heard heels clicking, slow, steady, and her head jerked up. Through the curtain slit, she saw her, the woman from the gala, from the overpass, her coat smudged but her posture unbroken. Melania paused at the threshold, her eyes finding Sophia first, then Elena. The sight struck her hard. Tubes, monitors, a frail figure fighting to breathe. She'd seen Baron in a hospital bed once, a fever that wouldn't break, her own hands powerless then. Now she could act. She stepped closer, her voice low. How is she? Sophia flinched, her grip on Elena's hand tightening. They're trying, she said, her voice small, cracked. She's been sick a long time. Her eyes searched Melania's, green, steady, familiar in a way she couldn't pinpoint. You got her here, she added softer, a question in it. Melania nodded, settling into a chair beside her, close but not crowding. Yes, she said simply. She needed this. Sophia swallowed, her throat dry. They said cancer and infection. They're giving her medicine, but... She trailed off, fear choking the rest. Melania's gaze shifted to Elena, her chest rising faintly under the blanket. She's strong, she said, more to herself than Sophia, her mind slipping back. Sevnica, her mother sewing through exhaustion, her own nights pacing with Baron. Stronger than she knows. Sophia frowned, puzzled, but didn't argue. A doctor approached, young, hairy, clipboard in hand. You're with her? He asked, glancing between them. Melania stood, her height imposing. Yes. What does she need? The doctor sighed, flipping a page. Antibiotics for the sepsis, fluids, nutrition. The cancer's advanced. Chemo might help, but she's weak. We're stabilizing her now. Sophia's breath hitched, her hand squeezing Elena's until her knuckles whitened. She'll get better? She asked, her voice pleading. The doctor hesitated, his eyes kind but cautious. We're doing everything we can. She's got a chance, if we caught it in time. He turned to Melania. Insurance? Melania's jaw tightened, her decision instant. No questions, she said, her tone cutting through. Bill me. All of it. The doctor blinked then nodded, too busy to probe. All right. We'll keep you updated. He hurried off, leaving a heavy silence behind. Sophia stared at Melania, her mouth parting. Bill you? She echoed, disbelief sharp. You don't even. She stopped, shaking her head. Who are you? Melania sat again, her hands folding in her lap, her face calm but her mind racing. Someone who understands, she said, her accent thickening, unguarded now. I came here once, New York years ago. No money, no name. Just dreams. She paused, her eyes distant. My mother worked, sacrificed. I learned to fight from her. Sophia listened, her weariness easing, a thread pulling tighter between them. Elena moaned softly, her fingers twitching. Sophia leaned closer, brushing her mother's hair back. She fought too, she whispered. From Slovenia, better life, she said. Melania's breath caught. Slovenia, confirmed, a piece snapping into place. She brought you here, she said, her voice steady but warm. That's strength. Sophia nodded, tears brimming. She was a teacher there, before the cancer. Before everything. Melania filed it away, teacher, fighter, mother, her resolve hardening. James lingered by the curtain, his phone buzzing, likely updates, questions, but Melania ignored it. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. She'll get what she needs, medicine, care. You both will. Sophia's eyes snapped to hers, searching. Why me? Why us? She asked again, softer now, less a challenge, more a plea. Melania's lips twitched, not a smile, but close. Because I heard you, she said, echoing her words from the overpass, from Sevnika's echoes. And because I can. Sophia sank back, exhaustion and relief warring in her chest. The woman, still nameless to her, sat like a pillar, unyielding, her presence a shield Sophia hadn't known she needed. Elena's monitor beeped steady now, a faint rhythm of hope. Melania watched, her mind turning. Hospitals, bills, a plan forming, quiet but firm. She didn't know their full story, not yet, but she knew enough. Inside, her mother's voice whispered, "Help where you can, Melania." She would. The hospital's hum softened as night wore on at Mount Sinai West, the trauma bay's chaos easing into a steady rhythm of beeps and murmurs. Melania Trump sat beside Sophia Krell, her coat draped over the chair's arm, her posture straight despite the late hour. Beyond the curtain, Elena Krell breathed under an oxygen mask, her chest rising more evenly now, before dripping life back into her frail frame. A nurse adjusted a monitor, her movements quick and precise, while Sophia watched, her hands clasped tight, her 37 cents forgotten in her pocket. Sophia's eyes flicked to Melania, the woman's calm both unsettling and magnetic. Hours ago, she'd been a stranger under the overpass. Now she was here, steadying them in a storm Sophia couldn't face alone. The doctor's words lingered. Caught it in time. And antibiotics flowed through Elena's veins, battling the sepsis, offering a chance. Sophia's throat burned, relief and fear tangling. She glanced at her mother, then back at Melania, her voice barely a whisper. She's going to be okay?" Melania turned, her green eyes steady, softening at the edges. "The doctors are good here," she said, her accent thick, deliberate. "They'll fight for her." She didn't promise, couldn't, but her tone carried weight, a quiet certainty Sophia clung to. A doctor approached, older this time, his face etched with fatigue but kind. "Mrs. Krell is stabilizing," he said, glancing at his chart. "Sepsis is responding to treatment, lungs are clearer. The cancer's still there, advanced, but we can start chemo soon if she gets stronger." He looked at Melania. "You're covering this?" She nodded, firm. "Everything." Sophia's head snapped up, her breath catching. "Everything?" she echoed, her voice louder now, raw. "You don't even know us." The doctor stepped back, sensing the shift, and Melania met Sophia's gaze, unflinching. "I know enough," she said, her words slow, measured. "You're here, she's sick, you need help. That's enough." Sophia shook her head, disbelief warring with gratitude. "Nobody does this. Nobody just pays for strangers." Her hands trembled, the weight of it sinking in. Hospital beds, medicine, a chance Mama might live. Melania leaned forward, her voice dropping. "I'm not nobody," she said, not with arrogance, but honesty, a crack in her polished exterior. "I came to this city with nothing, less than your 37 cents. Someone gave me a chance once, a job, a room. I didn't forget." Sophia frowned, her mind racing. That accent, Slovenian, like Mama's, like hers. "You're from there?" she asked, tentative, testing. Melania's lips twitched, not a smile, but close. "Sevnica," she said simply, the name a bridge, a tether. Sophia's eyes widened, a spark igniting. "Mama's from Novo Mesto." The connection hit Melania like a quiet wave. Novo Mesto, an hour from Sevnica, close enough to touch her past. She saw her mother's hands, stitching late. Sophia tested it. Melania, her lips forming the words silently. It felt real, not a stranger's name, not a lie. "Sophia," she offered back, her voice small but firm. "And she's Elena." Melania nodded, filing it away. Sophia, Elena, a family she'd pulled from the dark. The nurse returned, checking Elena's floor, her voice breaking the moment. "She's waking up slowly. You can talk to her soon." Sophia's face lit up, a flicker of hope, and she leaned closer to Elena, whispering, "Mama, I'm here." Melania stood, stepping back to give them space, her mind turning. Medicine was a start, but they needed more: shelter, stability, a life beyond this bed. She pulled out her phone, texting James, who waited in the hall. "Find Jana Novak, my friend from Ljubljana. She works with immigrants here. Tell her I need her." Jana, sharp, resourceful, a lifeline from her modeling days, could help, could build what Melania couldn't alone. She didn't wait for a reply, her focus returning to Sofia, to Elena's faint stirrings. Elena's eyes fluttered open, cloudy but alive, finding Sofia's face. "Srce smoj," she rasped, her voice weak, cracked, "My heart," in Slovenian. Sofia's tears fell now, free, her hand squeezing Elena's. "You're okay, Mama, you're going to be okay." Elena's gaze shifted, landing on Melania, confusion creasing her brow. "Who?" she whispered. Sofia glanced back, her voice steadying. "Melania. She got you here." Elena's lips parted, a question forming, but her strength faded, her eyes closing again. Sofia turned to Melania, gratitude raw in her stare. "Thank you," she said, the words heavy, real. Melania nodded, her chest tightening. "Rest," she said to both of them, her tone a quiet command. She stepped into the hall, James meeting her with a nod. "Jana's on her way," he said. "She knows people, housing, clinics." Melania's jaw set, her plan sharpening. "Good. They need a home, not a tarp." Inside, her mother's voice whispered, "Help where you can, Melania." She thought of Baron, safe in his dorm, and Elena, fighting in hers. This was her gift, unseen, unspoken, but growing. Sofia watched Melania go, her shadow lingering beyond the curtain. "Melania," she murmured, testing it again, a name tied to hope she hadn't felt in months. Elena's hand twitched in hers, warm now, alive. The monitor beeped steadily, a promise holding firm. Sofia didn't know what came next, didn't know this woman's full story, but for the first time, she believed in next, and more. And that was enough. The hospital's hum softened as dawn crept through Mount Sinai West, pale light filtering past the trauma bay's curtains. Melania Trump stood in the hallway, her coat folded over her arm, her eyes fixed on the glass doors where James had gone to meet Jana. Hours had passed, hours of waiting, planning, her mind weaving a net to catch Sofia and Elena before they fell again. Her phone buzzed, Baron, a text. "You okay?" "Late night." She typed back, swift. "Yes, helping someone." "Sleep well." Her chest warmed, but her focus stayed sharp. Another mother, another child here, now. Inside the bay, Sofia Kraus sat by Elena's bedside, her hands still clasped around her mother's, her patched jacket swapped for a clean sweater Jana had sent ahead. The monitors beeped steadily, a fragile rhythm of life, antibiotics working, oxygen flowing, Elena's color returning, faint but real. Sofia's eyes burned from exhaustion, but she didn't let go, didn't blink, afraid the moment might shatter. Melania, her name a quiet anchor, hadn't left, hadn't faltered. Sofia glanced at the curtain, wondering, her 37 cents a distant ache in her pocket. Who was she really? Elena stirred, her eyelids fluttering, then opening, cloudy at first, then sharpening as they found Sofia. "Srce smoj," she whispered, her voice hoarse but stronger, her Slovenian accent wrapping the words like a blanket. "My heart." Sofia's breath hitched, a sob breaking free. "Mama, you're awake," she said, leaning closer, her tears falling onto the blanket. Elena's hand tightened, weak but present. "You're here," she murmured, then frowned, her gaze shifting past Sofia. "And her?" Sofia turned, and there she was, Melania, stepping back into the bay, her presence quiet but undeniable. Elena's brow creased, confusion mixing with recognition. "You," she rasped, her memory piecing together, the overpass, the ambulance, this woman's voice cutting through the haze. Melania approached, settling beside the bed, her movements slow, deliberate. "I'm Melania," she said, her tone warm, unguarded. "You're safe now." Elena's eyes narrowed, searching. "Why?" she asked, her voice frail but pointed, a teacher's instinct lingering. "Why us?" Melania met her gaze, steady, her accent thickening as she spoke. Because I know Novo Mesto, she said, the name a quiet gift. Because I know what it's like to fight for more, for a child. Elena blinked, surprise flickering, then softening. You're Slovenian? She whispered, a crack in her guard. Melania nodded. Sevnica. Not far from you. The connection landed. Two mothers, two journeys, continents apart but threaded together. Elena's lips parted, a question forming, but a cough stole her breath, her hand clutching Sophia's. The curtain muscled, and a new figure stepped in, Jana Novak, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun, her coat dusted with morning frost. She was 50, sharp-eyed, her Ljubljana roots etched in her brisk stride. Melania, she said, her voice low, familiar, a faint smile breaking her stern face. You don't call unless it's trouble. Melania stood, her relief subtle but real. Jana, she said, gesturing to Elena and Sophia. They need you. Jana's gaze swept the scene, hospital bed, tired girl, a woman fighting to live, and nodded, understanding instant. Immigrants? She asked. Slovenian, Melania confirmed. No papers, no home, yet. Sophia watched, her heart pounding. Another stranger, another voice. But Melania's calm held her steady. Jana knelt by Elena, her tone softening. I'm Jana. I help people like us, new here, lost here. We'll get you a place, medicine, papers if you need them. Elena's eyes widened, wary but hopeful. A place? She echoed, her voice trembling. We've been under the bridge. Jana's jaw tightened, a flash of anger, at the system, the city, then softened. Not anymore, she said firm. Melania started this, I'll finish it. Sophia's head tilted, her eyes darting to Melania. Started what? She asked, her voice rising, curious, insistent. You're not just some lady, are you? Melania paused, caught by the question, her name's weight pressing in. She could tell her, Trump, First Lady, a life Sophia wouldn't grasp. But it didn't fit, not here. I'm someone who can help, she said instead, her tone even, deflecting. Sophia frowned, unsatisfied, her mind spinning, Sevnica, this hospital, this power. But who? She pressed, her Slovenian stubbornness flaring. Melania glanced at Jana, a silent signal, later. Someone who's been where you are, she said, her voice dropping, intimate. Lost, scared, fighting for family. Sophia's breath caught, the words sinking deep. Mama's stories of Novo Mesto, leaving everything, echoed back. Elena watched, her strength fading but her mind sharp. You've done more than enough, she murmured, gratitude rough in her throat. Melania shook her head, slight but firm. Not yet, she said, her eyes on Sophia, on Elena's fragile grip. Jana pulled a notebook from her bag, her pen scratching quick notes, housing lists, clinic contacts, a plan taking shape. I've got a unit, small, near here, she said, glancing at Melania. Temporary, but safe. Papers can wait, health first. Melania nodded, her resolve hardening. Do it, she said, then turned to Sophia. You'll go with her, both of you, when she's ready. Sophia stared, her chest tight. A home? She whispered, the word foreign, fragile. Melania's lips curved, not a smile, but close. A start. Elena's hand squeezed Sophia's, her eyes drifting shut, exhaustion winning. Vala, she breathed, thank you, and the late morning sun pierced Manhattan's fog, casting slanted rays through Mount Sinai West's windows as Elena Krause sat up in her hospital bed, her hands steadier, her breaths deeper. The sepsis had retreated, antibiotics and fluids weaving a fragile recovery, though the cancer lingered, a shadow awaiting chemo's fight. Sophia stood beside her, folding a borrowed blanket, her patched jacket swapped for a clean sweater Jana had provided. Her eyes flicked to the door, expecting Melania, the woman whose name she knew but whose story she didn't, yet. Melania Trump stood outside the hospital, her coat buttoned against the chill, her dark sunglasses shielding her from glances. James waited by the SUV, Jana beside him, her notebook tucked under her arm. "The unit's ready," Jana said, her voice brisk, efficient. "One bedroom, furnished, near a clinic. They can move today." Melania nodded, her gaze on the hospital doors. "Good," she said, her accent soft but firm. "She's strong enough?" Jana shrugged, a faint smile. "Stronger than yesterday." "You gave her that." Melania's chest tightened, Sevnika's echo, her mother's grit, pulsed inside her. Inside, a nurse adjusted Elena's floor, her tone cheerful. "You're cleared to go, Mrs. Krell. Rest, meds, follow-ups, doctor's orders." Elena managed a weak smile, her Slovenian accent threading her words. "Thank you," she said, her hand finding Sophia's. Sophia squeezed back, relief washing over her. But questions gnawed Melania, this miracle, this shift from TARC to hospital to what? She glanced at her mother, then the door. "She'll come, right?" she asked, her voice low. Elena's brow lifted, curious. "Melania? She's different, Sophia. Not like the others." The doors slid open, and Melania stepped in, Jana at her side. Sophia straightened, her heart thudding. There she was, tall, composed, her coat still bearing faint stains from the overpass. Elena's eyes met hers, gratitude raw but guarded. "Melania," she said, her voice stronger now, "you've done too much." Melania shook her head, settling beside the bed. "Not too much," she said, her tone warm, steady. "Just enough to start." Sophia watched, her mind racing. Start what? Who was this woman who paid bills, summoned help, spoke their language? Jana stepped forward, practical, direct. "You've got a place, small, clean, yours for now. I'll take you there." Elena blinked, her hand tightening on Sophia's. "A place?" she echoed, disbelief softening into hope. "No bridge?" Jana nodded, her smile firm. "No bridge. A bed, a kitchen, walls. Temporary but real." Sophia's breath caught. A home, not a TARC, not a car. She looked at Melania, her voice slipping out. "You did this?" Melania's lips curved, not a full smile, but close. "We did," she said, nodding to Jana. "You'll see." The discharge papers signed, a wheelchair rolled in, hospital rules, and Sophia helped Elena into it, her mother's weight lighter but alive in her hands. They moved through the halls, Melania and Jana leading, James trailing with a bag of their few belongings, clothes, meds, a life patched together. Outside, the SUV waited, its black frame gleaming in the sun. Sophia hesitated, her sneakers scuffing the pavement. "We're going with you?" she asked, her eyes on Melania, probing. "Yes," Melania said, simple, final, opening the door. The drive was short, 10 blocks, a quiet street near the clinic, and Sophia pressed her face to the window, watching the city blur. Elena sat beside her, her head resting back, her breast steady. "From Novo Mesto to this," she murmured, a faint laugh breaking through. Melania caught it, her own memory stirring. Sevnica to New York, a leap she'd taken alone. "A new start," she said, her voice low, a promise shared. Sophia glanced at her, questions burning. Melania, Slovenian, powerful. Too powerful for just kindness. The building loomed, brownstone, modest, its steps worn but solid. Jana led them up, key in hand, unlocking a door on the first floor. Inside, it smelled of fresh paint, one bedroom, a small kitchen, a couch older but clean. Sophia stepped in, her sneakers silent on the wood floor, her eyes wide. "This is ours?" she asked, turning to Jana, then Melania. Jana nodded. "For now, 3 months, maybe more. Clinic's 2 blocks away, school nearby." Elena sank onto the couch, her hand brushing the fabric, tears brimming. "Vala," she whispered, her voice breaking, "thank you," in Slovenian. Sophia wandered to the kitchen, her fingers tracing a chipped counter, then stopped, facing Melania. "You're not just some lady from Sevnica," she said, her tone sharp, bold. "Nobody does this, hospitals, houses, nobody." Melania paused, her sunglasses off now, her green eyes meeting Sophia's. "I'm someone who can," she said, echoing her words from the hospital, deflecting again. Sophia's jaw tightened, her Slovenian stubbornness flaring. "But why hide it? What's your name, really?" Elena looked up, curious now, sensing the shift. Melania's breath held, the weight of Trump pressing in. First Lady, headlines, a life Sophia wouldn't grasp. She could say it, end the questions, but it felt wrong, too loud for this quiet gift. "Melania is enough," she said, her voice soft, firm. "For now." Sophia frowned, unsatisfied, her mind spinning. School, libraries, she'd find out, she'd dig. "For now," she repeated, testing it, a challenge accepted. Melania saw it, the spark, the fight, and inside, her mother's voice whispered, "She's like you were, Melania." Jana broke the tension, practical as ever. "Meds are here, groceries tomorrow. Clinic tomorrow, too, chemo consult." Elena nodded, her strength fading but her spirit lifting. "We'll manage," she said, her eyes on Sophia, then Melania. "Because of you." Melania stepped back, her role shifting, giver to observer. "Rest," she said, her tone a quiet command. "This is yours now." Sophia watched her go, her questions unanswered but her trust deeper, a thread pulling tighter. She'd find out, somehow. The afternoon sun filtered through the brownstone's narrow windows, casting soft patches of light across the worn wooden floor. Sophia Kraus sat at the small kitchen table, a chipped mug of water in her hands, her eyes tracing the room, clean walls, a couch, a bedroom where Elena now rested. It wasn't much, but it was more than the tarp, more than the cold concrete of the overpass. Her 37 cents sat on the counter, a relic of yesterday, useless now but heavy with memory. Her mind churned. Melania, the woman who'd made this happen, a puzzle she couldn't yet solve. Across the city, Melania Trump stood on her penthouse balcony, the skyline sprawling beneath her, a cup of tea cooling in her hands. Her coat hung inside, still bearing faint stains from the overpass, a quiet reminder of where she'd been. She'd stepped back, let Jana take the reins, but her thoughts stayed with Sophia and Elena, two lives she'd pulled from the shadows. Her phone buzzed. "James, a brief update." "They're settled. Jana's on it." She nodded to herself, her gaze distant. Inside, her mother's voice whispered, "Help where you can, Melania." She had, and she would. In the brownstone, Elena emerged from the bedroom, her steps slow but steadier, a blanket draped over her shoulders. The hospital's antibiotics had bought her time, but the cancer loomed, a battle yet to come. "Sophia," she called, her voice soft, her Slovenian accent warm. Sophia turned, setting the mug down. "Mama, you should rest," she said, rising to help. Elena waved her off, sinking onto the couch. "I've rested enough. Tomorrow, the clinic." She touched the blanket, her fingers lingering. "This place, it's real?" Sophia nodded, her throat tight. "Because of her." Elena's eyes sharpened, curious. "Melania," she murmured, testing the name. "She's not just kind, Sophia. She's something else." Sophia sat beside her, her jaw set. "I know," she said, her voice low, determined. "She said Sevnica, like Novo Mesto. She's Slovenian, but she's more. I need to know who." Elena frowned, a teacher's instinct stirring. "Be careful, say Smoj. She's helped us, don't push too hard." Later, Sophia slipped away while Elena rested at the clinic, heading to the school Jana had mentioned, public, close, a place she could start. The library was small, its computers old but humming. She sat, her fingers hovering over the keys, then typed. Melania Sevnica. Results flooded the screen, articles, photos, a name she hadn't expected, Melania Trump. First Lady. Sophia's breath caught, her eyes scanning, a Slovenian model, married to a president, a life so far from hers. Was it her? The woman in white kneeling in the dirt? She clicked a photo, green eyes poised, familiar. Her heart thudded. Trump, She whispered, the word foreign heavy. She scrolled, Sevnica, New York, a story of rising from nothing. It fit, but it didn't. The Melania she knew didn't wear titles. She wore a stained coat, spoke softly, saw her. Sophia leaned back, her mind racing. She needed proof, more than a screen, more than a name. She'd asked, she'd watch, she'd know. Melania sat in her penthouse, a rare quiet moment, her phone silent. Jana had called earlier. Elena's chemo was set, the apartment stocked, Sophia enrolled. She pictured them, the girl's fierce eyes, the mother's fragile hope, and felt the thread pull tighter. She didn't need to be there, didn't need thanks. Her gift was in motion, unseen but alive. Baron crossed her mind, safe, distant, her own fight 1 year ago. This was different, rawer, but the same ache drove it. Back at the brownstone, Sophia returned as Elena napped, her school bag slung over her shoulder. She sat at the table, staring at the 37 cents, her resolve hardening. Melania Trump. She tested aloud, the name strange on her tongue. She'd seen the photos, the headlines, but it wasn't enough. She needed the woman herself, the one who knelt, who'd said, I see you. Tomorrow, she'd go back to school, dig deeper, library books, maybe a teacher who'd know. Elena stirred, waking to Sophia's quiet murmur. What's that, Sophia? She asked, her voice groggy. Sophia hesitated, then shrugged. Nothing, Mama. Just thinking. Elena watched her, sensing the shift, but said nothing, her hand resting on the couch. Sophia's eyes flicked to her. Chemo tomorrow, a fight ahead. She'd find Melania's truth, not just for herself, but for them. Across the city, Melania gazed at the skyline, unaware Sophia's search had begun, a spark she'd lit now burning brighter. The early morning air hung crisp over Manhattan, a faint chill clinging to the brownstone's quiet street as Sophia Crow walked Elena to the clinic. Elena's steps were slow, her blanket swapped for a coat Jana had brought, her face pale but resolute. Chemo started today, first dose, first fight, and Sophia's hand stayed firm on her mother's arm, her school bag slung over her shoulder. Inside, her mind buzzed, Melania, the name. Trump, the pieces she'd found online. She hadn't told Mama, not yet, but today she'd know. She'd find her, ask her, see the truth in those green eyes. Across the city, Melania Trump stood by her penthouse window, the skyline sharp against a pale sky, her tea steaming in her hands. She'd woken early, restless, her thoughts on Sophia and Elena, the girl's fierce gaze, the mother's fragile strength. Jana had texted late last night. Chemo starts tomorrow. They're ready. Melania hadn't replied, didn't need to. Her gift was in motion, a thread she'd spun from the overpass to this moment, unseen but strong. Inside, her mother's voice whispered, "Help who you can, Melania." She'd done that, hadn't she? At the clinic, Jana met them, her brisk nod softening as she guided Elena to a chair. "First session, 2 hours," she said, her voice steady. "You'll feel it, but we've got you." Elena nodded, her hand squeezing Sophia's. "Stay close, stay smooch," she murmured, her Slovenian accent thick with love, "my heart." Sophia forced a smile, her chest tight. "I will, Mama." The nurse hooked Elena 2 and 4, the drip starting slow, and Sophia watched, her resolve hardening. She slipped out, whispering, "I'll be back," her feet already moving, 2 blocks to the school, then more. Sophia reached the library, her breath quick, her fingers flying over the computer keys. Melania Trump contact. A long shot, but she tried. No numbers, no emails, just polished websites and old news. She frowned, then typed, "Trump Tower." Memorizing the address, 5th Avenue, not far. She grabbed her bag, her 37 cents jingling in her pocket, a stubborn relic. She'd go there, wait, demand something. She glanced at the clock. Elena's chemo had an hour left. She could make it. She had to. Melania stepped into the lobby of Trump Tower, her coat swapped for a sleek jacket, her sunglasses on. She'd planned a quiet day, calls, emails, but a pull tugged her downstairs, a sense she couldn't shake. James met her, his voice low. Everything's set with Jana. They're good. She nodded, her eyes drifting to the glass doors, the street beyond. Then she saw her, small, fierce, dark hair tangled, standing on the sidewalk, staring up. Sophia. Melania's breath caught, her hand pausing on her bag. Sophia spotted her through the glass, tall, poised, those green eyes unmistakable. She marched forward, her sneakers scuffing, her heart pounding. The doorman moved to stop her, but Melania waved him off, stepping outside. You, Sophia said, her voice sharp, breathless. I know who you are. Melania's sunglasses slipped down, her gaze steady. Do you? She asked, her accent soft, unguarded. Sophia's fists clenched, her words tumbling out. Melania Trump, First Lady. I found it, Sevnica, New York, everything. Is it true? Melania paused, the weight of her name settling between them. She could deny it, deflect, but those eyes, Sophia's eyes, demanded more. She removed her sunglasses, her face bare. Yes, she said simply, her voice low. It's true. Sophia's breath hitched, disbelief crashing into relief. Why didn't you say? Why hide it? Melania's lips twitched, not a smile, but close. Because it wasn't about that, she said. It was about you. About her. Sophia stared, her chest heaving. Mama's at chemo now. Because of you. Melania nodded, her throat tight. Good, she said, her tone firm but warm. She'll fight. You'll fight. Sophia's eyes burned, tears brimming but held back. You didn't have to, she whispered. You didn't know us. Melania stepped closer, her voice dropping. I knew enough. I was you once, Melania, with nothing but a name. Someone saw me. Now I see you. Sophia swallowed, the thread snapping into place. Slovenia's struggle, a gift passed on. Back at the clinic, Elena sat through the drip, her strength waning but her spirit steady. Sophia returned, slipping beside her, her face quiet but changed. Where'd you go? Elena asked, her voice faint. Sophia squeezed her hand, her answer soft. To find her. Elena's brow lifted, but she didn't press, sensing the shift. The chemo finished, the nurse unhooking the line, and Sophia helped Elena home, her steps lighter despite the weight. Melania watched Sophia leave from the tower steps, the girl's small figure vanishing into the crowd. She didn't follow, didn't need to. Her phone buzzed, barren, a call this time. Mom, you okay? He asked, his voice deep, distant. Yes, she said, her eyes on the horizon. Better now. She hung up, her mind settling. Sophia knew Elena fought, the chain held. Inside, her mother's voice faded to a hum. You did it, Melania. In the brownstone, Sophia sat by Elena as she rested, the 37 cents on the table, a marker of where they'd been. She's Melania Trump, Mama, she said, her voice steady. Elena's eyes opened, surprise softening to understanding. A first lady? She murmured, a faint smile. No, just Melania. Sophia nodded, her own smile breaking through. They'd been seen, lifted, and now they'd rise, together. The gift was complete, silent no more.